it's 4:00 and we're going to go ahead and get started with the town board work session for April 13th. It is 4:00. Goal of the work session is to have the town board receive information on topics of town business. So if there's anybody, members of the public, I think you'll be able to identify. Jess Humphreys will be able to identify if you're here. However, generally through a work session anyway, we don't normally take public comment. But if you do have something that you think you want to share or add, you do need to be recognized by Jess Humphreys. And she'll give notice to me about that, and then we'll make that decision at that time. We have 3 items this evening that we're going to be talking about on the agenda. And the first one is the IGA with the town of Severance. And so, who do we have who's going to be doing that? Is that Commander Lopez or Chief Klemick?
Commander Lopez will be doing there.
Okay, Commander, are you? We'll let you start then and talk to us about the Severance IGA.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the board, and other attendees. I appreciate your time.
So I have presented a letterhead and copy of the agreement to the town board regarding the intergovernmental agreement with town of Severance. What this agreement will allow us to do is provide supplementary police coverage while the Severance Police Department sends some of their newer officers to much needed training. The Police Officer Standards and Training Board does have a longstanding program established for smaller agencies such as Severance to finance other agencies' officers to help provide their coverage while their officers are attending training to help build their skills. The agreement that was drafted up spells out the responsibilities of Windsor, the town of Severance, and some other specific terms. Some highlights are that Windsor will provide officers as available to supplement the town of Severance for basic police coverage. This is only to be provided by the town of Windsor if we are able to meet our own needs first. And then this will be offered to officers as an overtime detail. Windsor will provide the labor, and the state will provide payment via grant directly to Windsor on Severance's behalf. Officers will be required to abide by the Windsor Police Department policies. If necessary and requested by the Severance Town Board, Windsor representative can go before them to detail or discuss any services or circumstances that came up during officers providing coverage. And let's see here. Severance has their monitor assigned, which is their chief of police. The term of the agreement goes through January 31st of 2021 and can be renewed at any desired period thereafter. Either party can terminate this agreement at any time. And the payment rate is set out at the state maximum of $50 per hour for each officer hour provided for service. The town of Severance will pay for any overtime required for court appearances by the officer based on actions they take in the jurisdiction. And any monies that Severance is liable for, such as that court appearance time, will be required to be paid to Windsor within 30 days. There were a few questions submitted by Town Board Member Kozlowski in regards to this agreement to clarify some points. I'll go over those now with your permission. Yeah. The first regards Section 1 and the phrasing of subject to financial terms and limits. What that refers to, again, is Windsor's availability to meet our own needs. And if we have officers who are available to provide supplementary coverage to Severance, they'll be then provided. Section 2, line 6 had a typographical error that was fixed and will be submitted in a corrected document at a later time should this go before the town board. The third of 4 questions is in regard to Section 8 that references Windsor's payment from post. This participation in this program is new for us, although the program has been in existence for quite some time. Again, the maximum that Post will provide for officer reimbursement is $50 an hour. And even though we haven't been a teammate with Post on this particular program, we have a 30+ year relationship with the Police Officer Standards and Training Board, and the state has a very good record of paying their invoices promptly. Lastly, Section 9 spelled out the minimum hours billed for court appearances. And again, those monies will be paid directly to us by Severance rather than Post. And Severance has agreed to the language in this, which would require them to make those payments if necessary. So that is the nuts and bolts of this IGA, and I'm open for any other questions that the board or anybody else may have.
Chief Clemick has a comment.
Okay, Chief?
Yeah, in reference
To Post, we've been associated and using Post for over 30 years. They're the ones who provide us our DUI funding, grant funding, the RAID. They're part of the RAID team funding also. So there is a long-standing track history of their interactions and submitting bills to them and them paying it. So if there's no risk of them not fulfilling their end of the agreement.
Okay.
Mr. Sislowski, you have a comment or question?
Yeah, just sort of follow up on that a little bit. And it sounds like, Chief, I guess we're okay. $50 an hour is an adequate amount to offset our inherent costs of overhead for the patrol, for the staff.
Yes, Mr. Sosky, what we're looking at here is similar to what we do with other off-duty jobs. We set a flat rate as to what they're paid. So if an officer, normal overtime rate is $48, they'll receive an extra $2. But it's similar to what we do in other things. We have a contract with the ranch for officers' services out there, and those two are flat rates.
And I guess the question on that $50, what I was asking on the court appearances in paragraph 9, obviously, I think that would be billed directly to Severance, I assume, not going through Post. But what's the hourly rate for that? Is it also 50?
Yes, and yes, sir. In the interest of consistency, that will also be $50 an hour. Case dependent, it's sometimes overtime for officers to go to court anyways, but this would keep the pay rate for that officer consistent for their involvement in any severance related matters.
Okay.
So David, can I interject a clarification? So out of that,
The 48 goes directly to the participating officer, and then $2 is kind of just collected as an overhead for maybe some kind of administrative services having to be rendered. Is that correct?
No, that is not, Mayor.
The whole $50. So
oh, they
regardless
do.
of
Okay,
working, it'll go directly to the officer through us, however.
okay. Okay, so that money,
To the officer, and is that then, does the money that we have to wait and get from Post, I'm assuming that's more of a reimbursement because we probably don't get the monies up front in time to pay them at the time that we have to get them paid, do we? Or would the goal be that we do?
Being reimbursement, similar to what we do with DUI task force time. So
gotcha, okay.
at the quarter we submit, in this case, Severance will submit a request for the class and for the reimbursement. Post will either authorize it or not authorize it. And then they'll pay following the successful completion of the class.
And
Okay.
to add on to that, if severance is not approved for training, we don't provide an officer to work the time because that officer would then not need to be backfilled on their end.
Okay. And so this contract you said goes till 21, and then will it auto renew, or does it actually end on 21 and then the board at that time would have to actually renew it if they wanted to continue it?
It would end at that time, and we could renew if needed, but it's anticipated and hoped on Severance's end that they will have necessary, through between 3 and 5 different classes that they have upcoming right now, COVID dependent. We would provide anywhere from 3 to 5 days of coverage at a time for an officer to attend a training. And we don't anticipate there being much need thereafter. But if such should arise, we would have the extra cushion here to add officers to work any additional shifts that might be needed by Severance.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay.
Mr. Sislowski, you have a comment or question?
Yeah, just to kind of follow up on that and just to make sure I can understand it, what it sounds like is during the time these officers will be out doing things for severance, they're kind of almost technically not on our payroll, that they're going to be paid as almost a contract officer.
No,
By-
the town would still pay them as if they were working at a $50 an hour rate. And then the state will be providing us reimbursement for those hours.
But
David, to answer
the
your
other,
question, they would be still our employee. They'd be covered by our workman's comp and all the other attachments to that. But it's similar to other pass-through charges we do for special events or other organizations.
okay, it sounds like it may or may not fully cover the fully burdened per hour cost to the town for an officer. If you took in all the benefits.
No, this does not look at the benefits. The $50 is a state is post maximum that they allow to be charged. So if we were allowed to make up the difference between their benefits, we may add on a percentage, but that is not permitted by the backfill from post.
We could charge at the severance. So they're responsible for anything above the 50.
Yes, we could.
It sounds like we're doing this at some cost to the town is, I guess, what I'm finally realizing. If you fully burden overhead, benefits, et cetera, per officer per hour. But if this is pretty standard for the industry, yeah, I'm okay with it. I'm just raising.
It is very standard for the industry, in reference to how it's worked. So
Shane?
Miles, do you have a comment or question?
Just have you in the room, okay?
Go ahead and unmute. There you go.
I thought Shane was talking in the background, sorry. Is this, do you have a supplemental plan where if we don't have anyone available, do they have an agreement with another municipality that would cover this?
that would be up to them, Miles. So if we do not have an officer available or cannot want to fill the shift because it is an overtime shift, then they would either have to find some other means of covering that shift or not attend the school.
Okay, and then Mr. Sislowski brought up a good point about the benefits, but they're really not getting extra benefits by doing this. So we're not paying extra workers' comp to have them involved in this.
That's correct.
No, but I would defer that to either Ian or Dean, and he is not here.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments?
Hold on one second.
Jessica's checking.
And we had just a few moments. Barry and Tom were having a hard time getting into the link. So it looks like I have Tom now as a panelist and Barry is on speakerphone in the room with us.
Okay.
Yeah, I got onto the phone. Shane, I hung up from your cell phone. I'm on the speakerphone. Or just on the line.
It was nice to have two cell phones for a moment.
Okay, any other comments or final questions? And then I guess we need to kind of gauge a consensus if the board would be, willing to approve this contract.
Because would you hope to have this approved on the 27th? Is that the idea? Okay, I'm seeing a shake of the head, yes.
Yes, approved, but we don't anticipate this being used for some time. The COVID response has basically canceled most, if not all, schools, outside schools, so this may be down the road yet.
Okay.
If I may add in, there is several.
Tentatively for a class in, I believe, mid-May. I don't anticipate that class going forward under the current medical circumstances, but it is still tentative on the books.
Okay.
So I guess, is there anybody who would be opposed to this agreement moving forward? Okay? Hearing, do you see anybody that wants to make a comment, Jessica?
No, ma'am.
Okay, or any final comments? If not, it looks like everybody seems to be in agreement, I think, with the contract and moving forward with having that appear on our agenda for the 27th. Okay? So let's move on then to the second item that we have this evening, which is rain dance golf cart use discussion. Again, Commander Lopez?
Oh, this will be me, Mayor.
Oh, okay, sorry, Chief Clemic.
This normally would have been,
when we had it set for the last work session, he was left for vacation, and I didn't want to dump it on him again here at the last minute. So he's on his days off. So
Okay.
I told him I'd cover it. With this rain dance golf car resolution, this is just a similar process to the Water Valley North and Water Valley South, and other golf cart friendly streets that are in place there for these projects. And this rain dance is the latest one. Originally, they'd asked that it be put on the Water Valley South, but we asked that wait until they had the streets and stuff put in up there. So I'll try to share the map of what we're talking about here. I hope you all can see that.
Yeah, it's up, Chief.
Okay.
Yep.
So if you look at the streets here, anything in red is prohibited. They cannot use. So New Liberty and 7th Street and County Road 13 are all banned, as well as Crossroads. The black roads are golf cart friendly streets. Golf cart, the green indicates, I believe, golf cart friendly paths or trails. So, and then any of the blue markings are places along New Liberty where they're allowed to cross over from north to south in rain dance. So this does not include any crossing on 7th Street to go from rain dance over to Water Valley, but that is something that they'll be working on in the future in reference to that connectivity. Again, this is just a similar ordinance in reference to the other golf car ordinances we have in town, whether it's Water Valley or Highlands Meadow. So are there any questions in reference to this ordinance? Are this a new designated for golf car friendly streets?
Okay.
Miles, you have a question or comment?
Yes, thank you. We have these up in my neighborhood and it hasn't posed a problem. My concern with this is the green lines, which are trails, cart-friendly trail. And I believe the New Liberty Trail is part of our trail network. And I'm not sure we should have part of our trail network where we have encouraged, the people to walk. And I'm more concerned with New Liberty, but I would echo that even along Colorado Boulevard, because ultimately that will be an access for people to get north towards the Poudre River. So
Thanks.
I don't know if it's an Eric question or a Chief question. About having a park
Technical difficulties.
Not sure what that was.
Yeah.
We're having, Dr. Jones got disconnected.
Yeah, you're the.
We can hear you in there.
Yeah, I don't know why I can't get the sound.
Okay, well, we can hear you on the speakerphone though, Dr. Jones, so let us send you a new link, okay?
Okay. All right,
All right, thanks.
thanks.
Thank you all.
Yeah, he's, Dr. Jones isn't getting any audio, so he's
Oh.
gonna.
Oh. Okay. Could somebody answer, or
Mr.
address?
Baker, I'll look into that more in depth unless Kim Emil has an answer to that already. But otherwise, I'll look specifically into the green markings as far as the trails.
Okay, thank you. Because in our neighborhood where the carts are never on our paths or trails, they're always just in the street. So I'd like to hear more about that.
Yes, sir. I will dig into that specifically.
In the resolution, we don't allow golf carts to be operated upon any sidewalk, pedestrian trail, or recreational facility within the town. So if those are trails that are designated as part of our network, we probably need to relook at that.
Yeah, I was in the assumption, Kim, that these were Water Valley trails, that they're private, but if they're
That's
part
what
of the system.
I think that's what I thought too, so.
Those trails are, the green line along New Liberty and what will run north and south on 13 are town regional connectivity trails.
I'll get an answer for that and get back to Water Valley in reference to what we're looking at. I appreciate that, Eric.
Mr. Sislowski, you have a comment or question?
Yeah, sorry, I raised my hand before Chief just made that comment, and Kim, but I agree, in fact, that if those are part of what we'd expect people to be riding their bikes on, taking their kids for a stroll, et cetera, then you shouldn't have golf carts zipping by. Same like Pooter Trail going through Water Valley North. The trail is there, but golf carts don't go on that.
Exactly. So if any of those are part of the trail, and if Eric's what he said is correct, and I'm sure it is, then they shouldn't be on it.
Good. Okay.
Eric, you had a comment or question?
Yeah, Rick, you scrolled up, so it allowed me to see the bottom. That green line all the way at the bottom, paralleling Crossroads, is also the same type of trail system. It's tied to the regional trail.
Is this their trail, Eric, or is this something that we put in, or is there?
I am assuming that is our trail because it looks to me like it dead ends on the eastern side on Iron Wheel Drive?
Yes.
Through the LeBou property and connect to Pelican Hills. So if that is the trail, that is part of the regional trail system as well.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
So somebody's gonna get some clarification and make that available?
Yes, I will get those answers, Mayor.
Okay. Anybody have any, so other than,
Participant ID followed by pound. Otherwise, just press pound to continue.
so other than maybe taking a look at that,
As an attendee and will be muted throughout the meeting.
okay.
You are
Oh, I'm trying to mute. So other than, okay. So waiting for that, other than that, is that a resolution? Were there anything else with that resolution that anybody wanted to look at before we see it coming before us on the 27th? Because I think we could still put it on the agenda, anticipate we'd have those, and we could have those, these questions answered by then, and.
I believe so,
make a
Mayor. I think we
yeah.
could have an amended map.
Okay.
We can have an updated and corrected.
Okay. Anything else in relationship to the golf cart situation, discussion? Okay, if not, then we'll move into our item 3 on the agenda this afternoon, which is the parking ordinance. And Chief, are you gonna take the lead on that one?
Yes, I am. Let me move to my the PowerPoint screen.
Okay.
Chief, while you do that, Dr. Jones, can you hear us?
I can see him.
We can see you, but we can't hear you. Stand by for a minute. Let me unmute you.
Okay.
Do you have your phone on as well?
Yes, I do.
Okay, because you have your phone and computer audio on at the same time. That's what the feedback is.
Okay, I'm gonna
So
shut the phone off.
let's try that. That'd be great.
Okay? Are we all right?
Perfect. Yep.
We can hear you. Can you hear us? You can't hear, he can't hear us. Okay.
So he's got an issue with his computer audio.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe just the volume is turned down on the audio.
Can you hear us, Doc? No.
No, so the phone is the only way he can hear us, but we can hear and see him through his computer. So there's something wrong with his mic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Damn it.
Okay.
Well, and can you join the meeting just by
He would have
phone?
just by phone. Yeah. I'll just let him know.
Yeah, I'll text him.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for your patience for trying to work out some things here, but I think, are we ready? I think we're ready, Chief, if you are.
Yes, we can go and get started. The question about our partners specifically with motorhomes and trailers has come up a number of times over the years. And last year, I believe Mr. Baker had one of the residents out in Highlands Meadow reach out to him in reference to wanting to extend the period for parking trailers and motorhomes on the street. The backstory that is we've had this question come up repeatedly over the years. In fact, at one point in time, we didn't allow trailer parking of that size on the street at all. And what we did is if a resident wanted to park his trailer on the street overnight before he was going camping or fishing the next day, they would simply call the PD and we'd write it down in our pass-on book to say that, hey, listen, John Smith's going to have his trailer out here, so don't give him a ticket tonight. Well, you can imagine as we move fast forward, as the town grows, that becomes almost unacceptable and untenable. We can't keep up with it, and it's just causing conflicts between the residents. And at that time, somebody came to the board and we changed the ordinance to what it is currently now, that we allow vehicles not exceeding 22 foot in length, boats and trailers, coaches, to be on the street for 4 24-hour periods during the month. So basically it's 1 day a week is what it really came down to. And we don't really push very hard in reference 1 day a week, or if they do it 2 days a week, it's not been a problem. So I'll start with the parking ordinance as we are now in the slide show. Again, motorhomes exceeding 22 feet in overall length, boats, trailers, coaches, and trailers, when engaged in loading and unloading or for related activities or for a time period not exceeding 24 hours, a maximum for 4 24-hour periods in any calendar month. The request to change this from the 4 days is now to change it to 4 48-hour periods, which really would involve every weekend trailers being able to park on the street the entire weekend. Currently, the way we handle it now, officers log any campers, trailers, or which they appear to have been parked and are not actively in the purpose of loading and unloading or in use. They'll go back and they'll check on it. If it's still there, they'll issue a parking warning unless it's a frequent violator, in which case then they may serve a citation. After warning, officers return 24 hours later, and then they cite the vehicle has not been moved. In most cases, what you'll find is if a person gets a warning, they call and say, "Listen, I need an extra day." They simply mark it down, and it's granted, and they're given that extra time frame to take care of it. We have far fewer requests from citizens wishing to extend the time frame that they can park their camper opposed to the complaints from campers being parked too long on the streets. Most of the complaints that we receive regarding campers are longer than 24 hours. So it's when a call comes in from a complaint, it's normally something that's been there for a day or for a couple days, unless it becomes a neighborhood problem where they're constantly on each other's backs every time somebody turns around. Changing from 24 to 48 hours would increase the number of complaints the department receives from citizens until we created an understanding what it is. There's limited parking in many areas already that result in conflicts from neighbors. Some of the streets we have, specifically like down around Rose, Court in that area, parking is at a premium as it is. Trailers parked on the street really create site issues and conflict between neighbors about who's parking in front of whose house. And there are some of the newer neighborhoods with HOAs that have current restrictions in place already. Some of the pros of changing to 48 hours from 24 would, residents could park longer and it would be easier for them without fear of being in violation of the ordinance. Some of the cons, the campers RVs are already one of the most frequent complaints our department receives. This would just add additional conflict. Many of the complaints regarding campers and trailers come from the community as anonymous complaints. So by the time we get there, log it and move forward, it results into being on the street longer than the 48 hours. Parking ordinance regarding trailers and campers is already one of the most confusing ordinances for citizens to understand. It is very convoluted in what's trailers allowed to be parked. And sometimes it's very difficult for some of the officers to understand the exact terminology of what's taking place. There's potential for increased congested parking in residential areas, and specifically our cul-de-sacs. Some of the older neighborhoods already, even along Elm and Locust in those areas, parking a camper creates some site issues as far as where it's parked at and cause conflict with the neighbors. Here are some examples of vehicles that are currently not in violation. The one on the left is a motorhome that's parked at First and Main. It's been there for some time. The little pop-up camper has been parked down along Chimney Park, and it's probably been there off and on from the owner for the last, I'd say better than 10 years. I know who the owner of it. And here are a couple others that are parked on the streets around town. We would like to recommend not changing or any time to the ordinance as it currently exists, and allow us to keep working with residents as periods of time come up. If someone calls in and needs an extra day, we allow them that extension. Or the last thing is maybe consider simplifying our ordinance and restrict all trailers parking on the streets for extended periods of time. This would basically eliminate the parking of the small pop-up campers and things of that nature, and have them follow the same rules as far as the parking on the weekends and freeing up parking spaces on streets. Are there any questions? I went through that pretty fast.
Okay. I want a couple of clarifications. This is only...
With regards to if they're parked on the street, not if they're parked in their driveways. Is that correct?
No, there is, well, this is, correct, Mayor, but there
are concerns for vehicles that are parked at homes that are creating site obstructions. Like John, I believe, has some concerns that have come to him in regards to that. And it's something that we perhaps need to look at in more depth.
Okay. And HOAs, if they have their own rule or law or ordinance against that, this would, the HOA supersedes anything that we would put out anyway, correct?
The HOA, and we have one example of about a year ago, a person had parked her camper in an HOA area and was sued by the HOA, and the HOA won.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah, so they can be more restrictive than us.
Right.
They can be less.
okay.
Okay, any other, okay, Jessica's seeing some other questions, so she'll call who she's seeing.
Mr. Sislowski, you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I do. I guess, Chief, I'm curious on the images you showed us of the trailers, the RVs not in violation. Is it because they're under 22 feet long?
Correct. They don't fit the current violation of our ordinance. It's got to be over 22 foot.
And I guess just to add, at Water Valley, certainly we have our own parking ordinances. There is, believe it or not, a big debate about who can actually control the street itself. And I think, Chief, I think what we have heard is essentially the street, having been dedicated to the town, is really the town's control. So the HOA really can only control the driveway, and we do.
That's correct, and Kim could probably speak more directly to this, but like I say, HOAs, they can sue you under the HOA rules and find you in fault there. So it would fall under that. It'd be a civil issue. So we would not cite somebody if the vehicle is not a violation.
Right. I guess what feels to me like expanding the prohibition to include things like you're seeing here that are in theory not in violation, making it applicable to trailers generally. I'm sympathetic with the loading and unloading, and I'm wondering if a compromise would be to allow 48 hours only once a month instead of 4 times a month. So
It's whatever you, as the board wishes to do, David. I'll tell you that the overall thing is that the larger the town gets, the more difficult it is for us to police that process. So who has a trailer pulls in on a Friday and the code officer or whoever isn't out there and may not see it until a Sunday. So all of a sudden now, when we start the enforcement process, it may end up being 4 days or longer. But still respond to citizen complaints in reference to that.
Okay.
Miles, you have a question or comment?
Yes, thank you. The thought, I mean, those trailers parked there for 10 years are much more concerned than someone parking 48 hours. My thought was, kind of along with David, maybe 48 hours for once a month or twice. But what about maybe getting a permit from the police department? Something they could put on their dashboard or in the window that says, it's okay from this period to this period.
That is just a labor issue, and we could do that, but it becomes an issue of manpower to create that and issue it out.
Because we have so many people.
It's not impossible.
Yeah, some people want to follow the process and do the right thing. And then it looks like in these pictures that people are, I don't know, not taking advantage because that's the rule, but this looks like a much bigger violation type of issue than someone parked for 48 hours to load and unload.
Well, yeah, and I understand that completely, Miles. The question comes in is, we have one person that wants to have the trailer parked there's 48 to 72 hours. And we also have another residence there that doesn't want it there. And so trying to meet the needs of both people and who's right, who's wrong, it's trying to, play Solomon here and not be over aggressive on either side. So, and that's why we've tried to work diligently with residents over the years to accommodate their special needs as they come up on a as-is basis.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have any comment?
Barry, you had a question or comment? Got some more.
Barry, go ahead.
Muted.
Unmute.
There we go. Yeah. So my comment, I guess, is along with David, is that I see there's two different things. I guess number one, I don't have a problem with the 48 hours. I think that's reasonable, but I acknowledge everything that the chief said about, where do we balance it between the people that don't want them there at all. I went and talked to a couple of my neighbors that have them. They seem like they're in and out of there within a day or two. And they're not there that often, usually before a trip, and I know every situation is different. And then, and so that's kind of issue number one. And I would support if others want to go to the 48 hours. I'd also support, like the chief recommended, was cleaning up some of the code where it's not so confusing. And I don't know that the 22-foot rule, makes a lot of sense because, like he showed in the photos, a lot of them that are more problematic are smaller.
Mr. Soslowski, you have a comment or question?
Maybe just echoing everything I'm hearing. I think Miles is right. If you look at those photos, what an eyesore for us to not being able to do anything from having people leave those there for years and years on end. I think we do have to address that by probably shortening or removing any length restriction. But I think where I'm hearing others lean is to the 48 hours, perhaps once a month, so that they can load and unload.
Okay.
Recently on Nextdoor, perhaps some of you saw an exchange with a family whose daughter works in healthcare and has to isolate when she goes home. So they've moved their RV out in the driveway so she could live in that and not potentially contaminate their family. So, whatever we're talking about here, I think has to recognize that there may be exceptions, and that sounds like one of them. Anyway, that's just my thoughts.
Ken, you have a comment or question?
Two questions. One, I guess is a comment and a question, is regarding the 22 feet. I think that has to do more, I'm assuming that has more to do with how many parking spaces are taking up versus whether or not something is an eyesore. Is that correct?
That may have been the original thought process, Ken. I'm not sure. I said this ordinance has been in place for so many years that it'd be hard pressed to go back and find the exact reason for any of it.
Yeah, I was just saying about the pictures you showed. I may not like the view, but it's only taking up one parking space. So that was one question I thought I had. The other thing, Chief, how often does it come up that someone is really requesting 48 hours? And I'm thinking this question came up a while back from one gentleman who is a little bit older, and his point was that he needed more time to load and unload. I'm just wondering how often that comes up.
I'll let Commander Lopez speak directly to that. He was in charge of the code officers and CSOs for a while, so he may have a more definitive answer to that. But I would tell you it's not very frequent. It's over the years, it may happen once a month, but it's very seldom it's the same person.
Okay, that's kind of what I thought. I like the idea, and I know it's hard to have gray areas, but I like what you're talking about currently. If there's a situation you work with the resident, that seems to be, for the most part, working. So I'm inclined to say leave the policy as it is, with our present police force having some sensitivity that if I got a broken leg and I say I need 2 days to unload or load, that you would work with me. I think that's a fair policy for our town.
So, and I was going to comment along exactly those same lines, Ken.
David, I don't think we want to complicate the situation or an ordinance even more for our officers. There are obviously a lot more important subject matters that they need to be attended to. And it sounded to me like that our police department is very amenable to folks. If they need a longer period of time, all they have to do is call or let folks know that they need a longer period of time. In this instance, if it's because of a physical issue or whatever, that they're having an issue. I think the complaint that I saw that we were getting is because the neighbor doesn't like it. And you're not going to change that neighbor, no matter if you say, I think that neighbor's only going to get more unhappy if we give them more time and more often to do it. So it's a neighbor complaint because, and also from what I heard is we're not actively going out. I mean, this is not something our police officers are actively going out and trying to find these kind of violations. These violations are far more coming to us because of neighborhood complaints. So I would be more inclined to, is exactly what you stated, was to leave this as is. And if nothing else, though, to help clean up the ordinance, maybe, to restrict it to, maybe any kind of camper or something along these lines of some of the things that are not in violation that we're seeing now. Did you see some others, Jessica?
Miles, you had a comment or question?
Yes, thank you. My question for Chief is, if you are making exceptions for people, doesn't that put your group into that gray area where now you're almost choosing sides?
Miles, it's always a razor's edge. You're walking as an officer when you. It's all gray area. So we try not to be overhanded either way. So is it simpler to extend this to 48 hours? Yes. Does it create other problems? It does. I would say that we've had better luck using our discretion and working with people than trying to have one size fits all.
Yeah.
Because also, didn't you also say, Chief, that you had far and few between folks who were making that request anyway? So, I mean, it's not like this is something on a regular basis you got to discern between.
No, we get more complaints about trailers being parked on the street, and it's not just campers. It's
Right.
other trailers also.
But you're not getting requests from, I need more time, and then you're having to make that call whether you give them more time or not.
It happens at least once a month during the summer specifically. This time of year right now, it does not. But camp trailers primarily are a summer issue with us. It's the other trailers that become a more problematic throughout the year. Somebody has a business and they pull their 5-footer trailer, box trailer behind and leave it parked on the street. That causes more heartache than the others. So, then, like I say, there was one neighborhood who had 3 or 4 pop-up campers at the same address, and that was causing issues with parking with the neighbors.
Mr. McCarger, you had a comment?
I did. I wanted to thank you. This is Ian McCarger, Town Attorney. I wanted to speak to Miles's question about choosing sides. And, I sometimes look at it as a concern for selective enforcement by law enforcement, sort of two sides of that same coin. My feeling here is that law enforcement always has discretion, so that factors in. But if a ticket is issued, it also goes to municipal court where the prosecutor has some discretion to look at the situation and make a decision about what kind of disposition or whether you go to trial or exactly what the ultimate outcome is of the prosecution. So I feel pretty comfortable with giving law enforcement the discretion that they already have, plus understanding that the municipal prosecutor has discretion as well.
Mr. Soslowski, you have a question or comment?
I do. I see Dr. Jones has his hand up too, but I'll try to be quick. First, I think there's a consensus. Chief, on your recommendation slide, you have simplifying the ordinance and applying restrictions to all trailers. I think you're hearing a consensus to do that. And then I think our only open issue is at 48. I don't want to create administrative burden. What we do here in Water Valley is if a person wants to park for beginning of a trip, end of trip, cleaning and packing, they can do 48 hours, but they have to go to the HOA office and get a permit that they put in the window that says this has been issued on, January 30th, and you're okay till February 2nd. And that's in the window, so when they first started parking and when it'll go away. The advantage is the neighbors then can see that they know the end is coming. They know that it's going to be gone. It works fine with us. It just, obviously, it would be a bit of an administrative burden that your office would have to manage if you go through that pre-application permit process, 48 hours once a month with acknowledgement and a window sticker. But anyway, part two, go ahead.
We could do that, David. I mean, it is a labor problem. We could work through that process. I'm not sure if it's something we could have assistance with IT to simplify it as much as possible. But Kim did make a comment that most of these times this is an issue of winterizing a vehicle in the fall, or in the one case that the gentleman that's contacting Mr. Baker, it's trying to get their camper set up, and they need more time to do it than because they're out on the road for 2 to 3 months at a time. So.
Okay.
Mr. Jones, I see you have a question or comment. Go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, thanks. I finally got connected, and I'm sorry I missed most of this, but if you've covered it, Chief, just say so. But first of all, I concur with the other board members who want to apply this to any length trailer. I think your examples certainly show an eyesore, and probably not the worst eyesores around town. So I'd be all in favor of that. I guess the other thing that struck me when I read this is, Chief, you're usually, you like to create compromises in these kind of situations, as long as I've known you, I think. And you seem pretty well set that we should leave things alone. And, to me, that carries some weight. Again, I don't know how many of these you deal with every summer, probably quite a few. But, if you think it should be left the same as far as the 24 hours, I'd support you on that.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. We do try, it's been an issue over the years of trying to make sure that we apply things fairly and equally to people, but to also be understanding of circumstances that vary from time to time. We don't want to be heavy-handed, which is very easy to do. And it's simplest to do is to set a time frame ordinance and just enforce it by the rule of law, and then dump it on to Kim and make her make the decision. But I think it's worked out the best over the years to try to work with individuals specifically. But I can easily agree to a concept if the board would like to extend it to 48 hours once a week or once a month would be sufficient. But whatever the board prefers.
Okay, we got another one.
Miles, go ahead.
Thank you, and I agree with Dr. Jones. I think Chief and all the officers are more than fair, and my concern is partially putting them in a resident-on-resident conflict where they have to make a decision. I think 48 hours once a month, and even maybe get a permit to do it, and maybe it can be through the clerk at town hall and not the police.
May I make a suggestion that we did this with the alcohol in the parks, but we did it for a year, and we put a sunset on it to revisit it at the end of the year to see how it works. Should this be an overburdensome process for the police department to take on, then we could readdress it to come up with either a modest fee to handle the administrative portions of it, or basically to allow it to stay in place.
Dr. Jones, do you have a comment or question?
Yeah, Chief, one more thing. If we're talking about redrafting things here, is there any way we could work into the ordinance as far as where these motorhomes park in relation to the intersections? I mean, there's one that in particular parks at it's a corner of 6th or a corner of 4th and Locust, and you cannot see around it when he's parked. I don't know how many feet it'd be, but it's very difficult to see around around his motorhome when you're trying to get out into the intersection.
I agree with you, and we could work with Kim in reference to that specifically as far as where its locations are at. Sometimes a problem, I guess we'd have to look at the problem, is it the resident there at that location that needs it for the purpose of loading, unloading? But we do have restrictions already as far as line of sight on intersections.
Okay. We have one other question.
Ken, you have a comment or question?
Yes, the idea of one 48-hour period per month, along with 3 24-hour periods, concerns me because I'm just putting myself in the position of a police officer or a police department, just keeping track of that. I think there might be some potential if a person were to apply for a permit for a 1 48-hour period. I can see that might take some of the pressure off the police department and would have, if they go to the town clerk, they get a permit, whatever reasons they might have, that might also communicate to the neighbors that, okay, they've gone through some kind of process and have special permission once for a 48-hour period. But I'm really concerned about having our police department try to keep track of, geez, this time you've had 2 48 hours this month and 1 24. I think that would be a logistics nightmare.
I appreciate that, Ken. I know we're running short on time here. If it's okay, how about I work with Kim and Sergeant Shaneline and come up with some other ideas to try to incorporate what we discussed here. And I don't want to start a war with Jess, but I think asking that they do this at the town hall might create another burden on them.
Okay. I think we have one more
question or comment.
David, you have a question or comment?
I did. It was reaction to what Mr. Bennett said. I guess in my mind, I didn't say it, but I had not envisioned it would be 148 and 3 24s. Chief, it sounds like you're going to go back to the drawing board and coming up with some standards, but I think if it were 124 and 148 per month, or even 148 per month, I think you've got some flexibility to come up with what you think is reasonable. I certainly was not imagining it would be essentially every weekend.
I agree. I think we have. I have some ideas to incorporate what the board is expressing now, and we'll come up with some other solutions. So, and we'll come back with a rewrite as to what we're looking at, if that works for you, gentlemen and ladies.
Yeah. So I think we'll just.
What I'm hearing is that you and Kim are going to work together based on some of the conversation you've heard to go back and relook at a couple of things and then come back and present a couple of other options.
Yes, we'll do that and try to find ways to accommodate everybody's concerns.
Okay. Then with that, I think that concludes the work session this evening, and we'll gear up to move over into our regularly scheduled board meeting here.
If I may, just note that we're going to end this meeting. You have a second invite for those of you that are coming.